Welcome to Deepgram's Voice of the Future podcast, aka our favorite nerds. At Deepgram, we're obsessed with voice, and this podcast is our exploration of the exciting emerging world of voice technology. I'm your host today, Sam Zegas, VP of Operations at Deepgram, and our guest today is Dan Gertz, CEO of Habitat Learn. Dan, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Well, Dan, this is our favorite nerds after all. So why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and specifically what kind of a nerd are you?
Yeah, I'd have to say I've thought about this for a bit. So I think I would be considered an antique and an innovation nerd. I'm kind of obsessed with both things. Yeah, I really like antiques, learning from the past of how they used to design things, and how in their own way they were innovative products and services, even if we don't consider them that now. So yeah, I'd consider myself an antique nerd.
That's interesting. It's a cool way to think about innovation by studying innovations that are no longer current, but which were important evolutions of some past technology at the time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. We forget how we got here in some ways in the world of technology, and even equipment is technology before things got digitalized. So I think that's cool to look at.
Yeah, and when you think about antiques, there's the evidence of craftsmanship, which is so front and center in the way that you evaluate an antique and think about the innovation that they were making.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I got a drink cart at home, which are popular now, but they have little locks on it. So even back then, they were hiding their booze.
Great. So you're CEO of Habitat Learn. Tell us a little bit about what you do at Habitat Learn and what your vision is.
Yeah. So at Habitat Learn, obviously the learn part, we're working with higher education. And so we develop our products with our clients. So we like to consider ourselves special that way, is we like to build solutions with the schools that we work with as partners, instead of kind of thinking we know everything and we're going to build them something and then try to convince them to buy it later. So we really enjoy working with students and different stakeholders, and to make sure we're building good products for them. Higher education is going through a big transformation. Obviously, COVID helped with that to make it more digital, but even just looking at how can they include access to all learners. And so we use the Universal Design for Learning principle framework. So all of our products are designed for all users in mind, not just the majority. And so we have built products and services. So we do note taking. So we have a note taking application, and we have note takers that provide that service as well. But we also use captioning. So we have a program called Messenger Pigeon that uses AI speech to text captioning, and then a human just corrects it so that anyone that needs 100% accuracy or close to that can get that live. And then the other cool product that we have is we promote digitalized learning as well. So we have a smart camera that goes in to a classroom and can broadcast to a wider audience in our platform called Coral. So yeah, it connects the physical classroom to a digital audience. So yeah, so we're lots of different products and services that all have cool names that relate to Habitat. So people can buy them individually, but of course the Habitat works better if everyone's there.
That's great. So you're really building products to enable the next generation of learning, in particular digital learning, with an eye toward making it equitable for people who have different ability levels.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah.
You've probably seen the evolution of the classroom environment change even more rapidly during COVID. Tell us a little bit about what the emerging needs are and how you've responded to them.
Yeah, no, exactly. So a good example of that would be, so before people would go to the classroom or not. So let's say they were late or not there. There'd be different reasons people could assume why, right? And then when we went digital, the attendance increased a lot, right? And so they're finding that when things went back, there'd be a need to stay digital to give more flexibility. And so, for example, schools started basically to learn more about their students, right? So at first, there's a still stereotypical version of a student, right? But then they started realizing, oh, there's students where maybe they're from a big family, and when they went digital, they could, you could hear their younger siblings screaming in the background of, when they're asking a question. And so our technology, for example, uses AI for like a voice focus, and so it takes out distracting noises like fans and dogs barking and ambulances, so that so that person feels that they can ask a question without other noises being heard, and also the audio quality is good for the other students that are there for the lecture. So that's probably the biggest example of what we couldn't expect until things went digital.
It's interesting. I've read a lot of articles recently about the participation in some demographic groups in learning as going down in the age of digital learning. What do you think are the challenges of learning in that sort of digital environment, and how do you address them with your product?
Yeah, good point. So for some people, there'll always be a need for in-person. And then for ones that remain digital, I think the biggest pressures going forward is if you're one instructor, who do you give your attention to, right? You have a physical audience and a digital one. And so it can be a real divide. And so going a step further than having, a device in the classroom where these students are remote, being there's one, it's smart devices, adding more technology. So it's easier for instructors to engage with those students. So for example, be like, hey, camera, is there any online questions right now? Things like that, to make sure that those students, and then through the device, can speak through, ask questions, and be interactive live in the lecture itself. So those options. The other option too is, especially for learning, that if you miss the lecture, you can be able to watch it later. Mm-hmm. Because life happens, right? And sometimes you miss, and so it can really help having those options.
Yeah. Thinking about all the different aspects of a classroom environment, like whiteboards and projectors and the different things that people might recognize from being in classrooms 20 years ago, higher education is changing rapidly itself, and the tools really need to evolve along with it. It's an interesting challenge.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's always been an irony with universities and colleges, because the first computer was at a university, obviously. So they invent all that, but like you say, for a long time, classrooms, the most technology they had was a projector. So it's definitely changed a lot recently. Yeah.
What's the hardest part about the work that you're doing?
I would say our client has a lot of stakeholders, from government grants and involvement of massively funding post-secondary. So their concerns have to be met, which might seem like a broad statement, but I'll give an example. Would be as we're streaming video and stuff, governments have concern, and there's laws around where the streaming can be housed. And so a lot of ed techs don't maybe know that, and then by the time they get through the vendor process, their product can't be bought because it's the server's in a wrong country. To their services are paid by a grant, or their technology is going to be paid by a grant, but the grant has rules that you didn't know about, and so it might not be covered. And so the school is going to go with maybe similar technology, but covered under a grant. And so I think that part is probably shocking when people get into it, is they think, oh, well, it's a cool enough product, it should sell, but there's these little things in the vendor process that can slip you up if you're not recognizing the amount of different stakeholders. Also, faculty have valid concerns, right, about their lecture content being safe and secure, and so we want to address those. Same, everyone's got concerns and needs to be listened to, versus just having one client type concept. You almost have multiple. Yeah,
definitely. So there's a procurement challenge and there's an implementation challenge, and you're dealing with these big institutions. Yeah, I imagine there's a lot that you have to consider there. Tell me a little bit about where artificial intelligence and speech technology fit into the thing that you're building.
yeah, no. So it's a big part of what we do. And so in the accessibility market, speech to text is massively important to making the world more accessible.
Mhm.
And what's kind of cool about technology is computers have disabilities. So basically, a computer is deaf and blind. They can't see or hear. So AI technology have made them smarter. So speech to text is one of the biggest ones, right? For it to be able to understand, predict, and help people learn through massive amounts of information. So for us, very specifically, we use it most for captioning, for obviously students that are deaf and hard of hearing, but also for just anyone who wants to read the captions. A lot of people, if they have the sound off, for example, for a lecture, but they want to read it instead, or maybe English is your second language. But those type of speech modules really do help those users in the end, right? Be able to read the content instead of just having audio only options. And then later on, of course, once something's put into text, computers can do a lot of cool things with that. So being able to search for past lectures, things like that become easier because they're captioned and they're searchable. And so, yeah, so it's accessible to the computer to do even more cool things with it. So that's what's, I think, really cool about the speech to text technology that exists. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cornerstone of making information available and also making accessibility sort of a feature of an equitable product that you're trying to build. If people have different understanding levels or they may be hearing impaired or something like that, just making it available to them is key.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
I'd imagine in the context that you are operating in education, there's a difficulty around accuracy on long tail vocabulary. In higher education, there's probably lectures about obscure topics where they're talking about words or maybe names of individuals in a history lesson or something like that, where it's difficult for a speech solution to get all of that accurate. How do you approach that?
Yeah, good point. So it becomes very important for higher education for that accuracy to be at a pretty high level. And so what we do is we kind of combine the best of both worlds. So especially in the industry, they used to think, okay, well, AI is good, right, for speech to text, but then, like you mentioned, there's these potential holes, right? And so, but then you would have human cart reporters who are basically just typing as fast as they're hearing it. But that's a very expensive pool, which once something's more expensive, then it's very limited for kind of worst case scenarios of when they would use it. So what we've done is speech to text has made, by having a human element to it, is it kind of de-skilled that job. So they're not having to do all the hard lifting of typing everything, right? They can just do the corrections. So when things are misheard, they can do that correction or add this kind of custom vocabulary, which I think is really good because I think higher education, almost like you say, has its own language in certain courses, right? Biology or even the culinary schools, right? This, French words for things. So yeah, so no, it's very important to still have some human element to improving the end service.
That makes sense. And this is obviously one of the ways that Habitat Learn and DeepGram partner with each other. At DeepGram, we're always thinking about what new use case models we need to build. And over time, thinking about how we can make affordable, scalable, but highly accurate models that can identify the long tail vocabulary in a number of different areas, whether it's a scientific topic or it is a specific industry use case, or the ability to just recognize names that are said. These are really relevant issues in the way that we want to consume the products of speech technology that are technically quite hard, but it's something that we love to think about.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's a great partnership that way. Yeah, very aligned. especially college grads. It's just a list of names
Yeah,
at some point. Yeah.
that's
So yeah,
true.
no, very important.
Tell me a little bit about where you see the risks for higher education not adopting these sorts of technologies. If what do you see 5 to 10 years down the road for a university that isn't making these investments in speech tech?
Yeah. So for schools that don't take it, these next steps um, basically impedes them from competing with other schools. As you probably know, there's thousands of schools in Canada and the US. And so students have lots of options. And so they're going to go to a school where that suits their needs for learning, and that's modern. That can offer not only digital education, but like we're saying before, something that that multiple means to access it. So even if it's just reading captions or the textual parts of it, just helps them learn, and it's a higher level of education, to be honest. And so it really helps schools, brands, and be able to compete locally and nationally, because students, and we've already started to see that actually in our markets that we've been doing this in, is students will change programs to go to the school with a similar program that has our technology in it. So
Really, wow, that's
yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
Great job to your team for that.
Thanks.
Yeah, I imagine that. So you're talking about people selecting into institutions that have adopted a certain kind of technology. I wonder if you have much data at this point, or if universities have much data about the quality of learning itself. Like this, does it really make an impact? And is that something that you're interested in studying going forward?
Yeah, very good point. We have actually a pilot that we're just finished formalizing, and we'll be rolling out this summer with a university in, I don't know if I can say their name, but in the States. And so, yeah, we'll definitely be publishing that later. But basically, all of our tech, all of our ecosystem is going in to courses and classrooms where students are doing well, basically. And there's a need to kind of improve student grades and stuff, and see if it makes a difference for them, and then they'll do a wider implementation after their cross campus, but start in kind of the worst case scenarios and see if it helps. Yeah.
I know that your focus right now is on higher education. Do you see yourself starting to work on secondary education or primary education at some point, and how are those needs different?
Yeah. Yeah, like we're always kind of looking at different verticals like that. The needs are the same but slightly different, I think. So obviously things for younger students would be slightly different in the sense of, especially even for speech to text, there is, you want to make sure that you're not catching things that are inappropriate in class. And even there's different states and laws about, having images of, people at a certain age and stuff like that. So just following those types of rules. So it's a little more complex, I think. COVID's probably helped with that. It probably modernized some of those laws. But I know, for example, when I was in school, in the region that I was in, if someone's parent, let's say, took a class photo of us, they would have to get permission by each parent. So you think of digital learning, if you're having remote students, there's all these things to consider. But I think COVID's definitely helped with changing people's perception of digital learning.
Yeah, most of the work that Habitat Learn and DeepGram are doing together today is, DeepGram provides fundamentally speech to text, and so we're helping to generate things like captions. But to tie into to the point you were just making, the next frontier in speech tech for DeepGram is really about understanding features. It's being able to understand the meta of what's going on in a conversation, and like, okay, this might be a sensitive word or topic. We need to treat it differently. Or, okay, this is the opener for a lecture. Great, we're going to mark it as such. And then we're going to say this is, one section of the lecture that was being received, and we'll sort of mark it as such. And that is that speech understanding is really a brand new frontier in speech tech that a lot of companies, but especially DeepGram, are really leaning into now. And I'm very excited about the future of where that will head as that technology matures over the next 5 years. It's going to be a very exciting space.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, it's very needed. Yeah, I agree. I was just going to say, I think it's the understanding after that, because at the end of the day, it's all just raw text, which is great live in the moment, but understanding it after is even, what, even things like, especially if you're doing digital learning and you have online content, what you want to be able to do is kind of like the Netflix of education after, right? So you may not want to watch the whole lecture again. You may want to just go to points that seem the most interesting, and you kind of decide that it learns your traits, but all that's going to be made possible, like you're saying, by having more of an understanding of that transcript.
Definitely. The trend that we see at DeepGram is toward an ever increasing humanization of speech technology. And what we mean by that is that when a human listens to a conversation, we're listening to the words themselves, which is the speech to text from a technical standpoint. But we're also creating a narrative, a meta narrative in our mind of like, here, this is why this person is telling me this thing, or here's where I should bucket this piece of information in my head. And so as we teach machines how to do that better and better, products like Habitat Learns will get stronger and stronger in helping people to manage the content that is being delivered to them by teachers.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Well, great. It's been great talking to you. Something that we always do toward the end of one of our episodes is to remind our listeners just how far technology has come, even in our own lifetimes. So I'm going to ask you to explain a piece of outdated technology and to explain it like you would to a kid who was born after 2010. So this person is about 10 years old. They've lived their whole life on computers, and I'd like you to explain to them how a typewriter works.
Okay, awesome. So, being an antique nerd, I have an old typewriter.
There you go.
And I don't have one, it's printed, but I'll show this to you. So if you can see here, this says noiseless. So this was technology back in the day. And this was really state of the art. So before this, people would write with pens, maybe even feather pens. So you needed ink, you needed feathers. Anyways, this replaced that. It's pretty cool. They're pretty heavy. And this was not noiseless because it's like a keyboard, like your computer. So that's not too strange. So it started, the idea of keyboards. And then as you pressed it, you don't need a pen anymore because there's an ink ribbon inside of it. So that replaced that, and then it would just hit the paper. If you made a mistake, then you would lose a lot of paper. But so don't make mistakes. That was impossible. There was no Control V or Control C or any of that. That came later. So basically, you slap that button, ink would go on the paper. So if you messed up, you'd have to change that. So they innovated it because they were really loud back in the day. So, but I'm going to show you how loud this one was, and this is what they were doing to innovate. This is what it sounded like. Not too bad. But still pretty loud, to be honest. Way louder than just your keyboard.
Yeah. I remember my parents had a typewriter, and it was incredibly, not only was it loud, but it was loud because you really had to like mash the keys. It's not easy to type on one.
Yeah, it's true. So they were thinking about it, it's annoying. It's too loud. So that's probably, what people would complain about. But it didn't evolve much after this. They had electric ones, same type of principle. But then after that, it scared the world when computers came out, because computers eventually replaced these things. And of course, now your keyboard's a lot quieter than that. And computers do crazy cool things now. So, but this is part of the evolution of a computer.
Yeah, right. Now we live in the age of silicon.
Yeah.
Thanks for playing along, Dan. And thanks for being one of our favorite nerds. It's been awesome talking to you. To all our listeners out there, thanks for tuning in. Come check us out for more information about DeepGram or for Habitat Learn. That's habitatlearn.com. And of course, you can always find us at deepgram.com and at deepgram AI at all of our socials. So with that, we're out. Catch you next time.